Muy buenos días a todos ustedes. Nuevamente quiero darles a nombre de México la más cordial bienvenida a esta sesión plenaria del monitoreo del marco de Sendai. Hemos buscado por todos los medios tengan ustedes una estancia agradable, pero a la vez, y lo más importante, es que podamos desarrollar el trabajo al que todos nos hemos comprometido a partir del marco de Sendai y que el día de hoy seguimos colaborando los países para poder obtener los datos necesarios para seguir implementando las medidas que permitan la reducción del riesgo en nuestros países. Les deseo a ustedes la mejor estancia durante este último día de trabajo y esperemos que todos los acuerdos a los que lleguemos después, poco a poco, los vayamos implementando en nuestros países con el fin y en nuestras regiones con el fin de buscar todos los modelos que permita a través del monitoreo, de la información, de la estadística, encontrar el camino hacia la definitiva reducción en pérdida de vidas y desastres en cualquier parte del mundo. Buenos días a todos ustedes y me permito ceder el uso de la palabra al señor Marcus Oxley. Adelante, si es tan amable.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to my co-chair. Good morning, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues. Okay, so we're now in the, we've now got a session on the wonderful world of statistics and information and monitoring. So we've got a lot of expertise in the panel and expertise in the floor. So I'm going to start with just a few opening thoughts, but perhaps from a more grassroots, community-based type of perspective. I work in a civil society network, and we've been very much involved in monitoring of these of the Hyogo framework and now the Sendai framework. So let me just share with you some of what I think some of the challenges and some of the opportunities are when we start to understand how we can better develop an enhanced monitoring process, which we think is an integral part of being able to deliver this policy aspiration, this policy framework down to the local level. And I'm very much been my understanding of this has very much been informed by a local monitoring initiative which civil society was involved in called Views from the Frontline, which tried to give a bottom-up complementary perspective to the governmental top-down perspective, which is coming down from the global framework down through to the national level and down to the local level. And perhaps one of the first things I want to really say is the challenge with these monitoring frameworks, in my perspective, from a civil society network perspective, is trying to get these monitoring processes actually down to that local level. You know, we have to connect with the change that is happening at that municipality level, at the panchayat level, at the parish level, and we need to make sure that we're looking at how these policy frames are actually bringing about systemic change at that local level. And that's not easy. You know, if you think capacities are quite limited at the national level, it's probably even more challenging as you get down to that local level. The other issue is that we came across was the issue about trying to make sure that our monitoring processes are relevant not just to the kind of the large-scale events, but are also able to look at the smaller scale, more frequently occurring disasters where a lot of the loss and damage is, but often doesn't quite connect into our national statistical databases and doesn't quite connect with our more formal monitoring processes. So trying to understand how we get that connection better. there's a big push now for disaggregated data. And I think that's also very important, because if we have better disaggregation of data, it means we're better able to tailor our policies and our plans and processes to the needs of different stakeholder groups, and particularly groups who have been disproportionately affected. So we talk about in the Sendai Framework about how we can pay special attention to the needs of people who are disproportionately affected. So we need to understand how these policies are connecting with those people who have been disproportionately affected. How is this information relevant to them? And how are the policies connecting to them? From my perspective, this is not just about taking data up to the national level, to the regional, to the global level. It's also about how we're making sure that this very rich information is actually accessible and used by a whole range of different stakeholder groups. So again, I think that's another very challenging dimension of this an enhanced monitoring process. And of course, the final point I'd like to raise is that what we often see at the local level is that people are not differentiating in their understanding of risk in the same way that our international architecture is differentiating the risks around these different international frameworks. And there lies an opportunity as well, because monitoring has the potential to strengthen the harmonization and the coherency of these different frameworks. So I think if we get this right, then actually all our talk about breaking down some of these thematic silos, I think the monitoring and our information and knowledge collection processes could be a key part of getting those synergy and the connectivity that we all want to increase the impact at the local level. So let me stop there from my thoughts on this as we go into this conversations on how we can strengthen our monitoring processes. And let me quickly introduce Robert Glasser. Robert is the Special Representative to the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction. And Robert's going to share with us some updates, the latest developments in what's called the Sendai Framework Data Readiness Review, which I understand is now really just hot off the press. So over to you, Robert. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Luis Felipe Puente. Como siempre, muchas gracias. So, one observation I'd make about the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction is that this key remarkable global agreement both reflects the progress that has happened to date and accelerates the progress on reducing disaster risk reduction. And one of the really critical ways it helps accelerate our progress is that it has this remarkable feature that member states have identified 7 global targets to reduce disaster risk. Not only have they identified several global targets, but they have additionally agreed and put in place a process which many of you in this room have participated in to identify indicators for each of these global targets. I know many of you already know this. I'm just repeating it just to bring us up to date. The fact that member states have agreed to this contribution to global accountability to achieve the goals they've set for themselves in the Sendai Framework is a really distinctive and remarkable aspect of this agreement. And so we have, as a result of the treaty, the agreement itself, the Sendai Framework, a sense of legitimacy globally for the work that is happening in countries, because each constituency within the country can say, our country has committed to achieving these goals, and now we have to work together across government to deliver that commitment. And it's created a sense of urgency beyond that legitimacy by having this global mechanism for accountability at the global level, which is really remarkable. And I want to acknowledge the intergovernmental group that that agreed the list of indicators for each of those targets. It's another UN acronym, OIEWG, open-ended intergovernmental working group on indicators. We love acronyms in the UN system. They did an absolutely remarkable job, and I also want to acknowledge, I don't know if anyone in the room is here from Jamaica, but if you are, your ambassador to Geneva, Ambassador Wayne McCook, did an outstanding job in facilitating the work of this intergovernmental group, you know, with patience and just remarkable facilitation skills. So I just wanted to acknowledge both the members of the OIEWG and also Wayne McCook for his outstanding work on this. If I now look at the, so we have these indicators, but now the obvious question is, how are we going to take forward the monitoring of these global targets with these indicators? And one of the key questions about these indicators is, what sort of data do countries have available to be able to report on the progress? What is the availability of the data? How accessible is the data? The quality of the data? And I know this is a very dry topic, data, statistics. But as you know, I know many of you are interested in gender, and one of the most fundamental elements of the discussion in gender, but it's also a principle in the private sector, is that if you don't measure something, it's less likely to happen, and if you don't measure it transparently. So these indicators are extremely important in that respect, in creating that sense of urgency. But what's available? How accessible is it? What is its quality in order to achieve this? And that's fundamental because you want to establish baselines, at least for some of these indicators, and then you want to be able to collect data to measure your progress in achieving the result. So, and just to point out, the first cycle of monitoring in which countries will be reporting against these global targets will be launched early next year in 2018, and will cover the periods 2015 to 2016 and 2017 to 2018. And that cycle will end in March of 2019. This is a bit technical, but I know many of you in the room understand the implications of those timings. So UNISDR, at the request of the members of the OIEWG, this working group, was asked to assess the current state of play with respect to the readiness of the data that exists there, so that we can launch this first cycle of monitoring of this important agreement. So what we did was launch an online product or template for member states to use to report on their readiness. And we had 87 UN member states across all regions assess their state of readiness to monitor and report, and particularly this issue of the availability of the data and gaps. But also, and this is really fundamental, because as you know, one of the goals in the Sendai Framework is international cooperation, and particularly wealthier countries helping less developed countries implement Sendai, including the ability to collect data and report. And so part of the readiness review also asked, what resources are required in order for you to be able to be ready to report? And I mentioned baselines. So today, our teams at UNISDR have been working very hard. I want to really thank them. And I know, of course, if they're working hard, the people who are actually responsible for gathering the data in member states are also extremely challenged to meet deadlines. But we wanted to present a summary report on the key findings of our readiness review. And let me give you some of the results of that review, hot off the press, as Marcus mentioned a moment ago. The findings show that data are available for 83% of countries for target A, which is reducing mortality, and 66% of countries for target B, which is reducing the number of people directly affected. And these percentages decline to 50% for target C, which is the target on reducing economic loss in relation to global GDP, and 60% for target D on reducing damage to critical infrastructure and disruptions of basic services. There's also wide variances for target E, which is the number of countries with national and local disaster risk reduction strategies in place, target F on enhancing international cooperation, and target G on substantially increasing the availability of multi-hazard early warning systems and disaster risk information. Before reflecting on the general themes in those figures, well, I guess maybe I'll say something about that now. I guess a general reflection on those numbers I gave you, and I've kept this summary at a very, the summary level, which of course look at the report in greater detail, of course, but there's clearly much more data available typically in member states on physical damage and human impact, and less so on economic losses, losses of infrastructure and assets, cultural heritage, disruption to basic services. I want to make one observation about this. These figures, of course, should not disturb you. They are reason for further action, and including international cooperation to support readiness so that when we roll out the indicators. Those of you who follow the Sustainable Development Goals process, which also has a set of indicators, and by the way, the OIEWG worked very hard to ensure that the indicators for Sendai are the same indicators that will be used for the relevant SDG targets to monitor progress on SDGs, so we don't create these silos and that there's coherence across these really critical international agreements. But there was a recent summary session on Sdg readiness, and it was clear that there are many SDGs where we have a long way to go for countries to prepare to be able to report against their progress. But so we have gaps, there are challenges, but this is a good start, but there's a lot of work to do. I'd like to encourage you to have a look at the report in greater detail, particularly because the results of countries' feedback, because the report includes feedback from member states, really highlight the magnitude of the work that will need to be undertaken literally by March of 2019 for countries to be able to measure the progress against the global targets, at least if we want full measurement globally as opposed to gaps in the data. And I just wanted to, on behalf of UNISDR, commit our organization to help member states as much as possible. We've been continuing to do this with helping member states with our partners, bilateral donors, agencies, UN organizations, World Bank colleagues, and others, to help support countries in developing these national disaster loss databases, which are such a critical part of being able to report, but also a critical part of the rationale for investing in reducing disaster risk. Because if you don't know what disasters cost and how those risks are changing, it's really hard to have a conversation with a finance ministry to say, invest more in this issue. With that data, as dry and technical as it seems, also means money. And that is a language that finance ministries understand. And the business case, of course, for DRR is extremely compelling in every other respect in terms of investments and return on investment. But we want to pledge to continue our support, to do whatever we can to support member states to put in place, develop, strengthen disaster loss databases. Currently, 98 countries have disaster loss databases, and this is, of course, really key. And the need for a collective effort in enhancing the availability of the data, the quality, and those sorts of things are also going to be critical. I want to recommend member states and relevant technical partners to consider actually a global partnership for disaster-related data for sustainable development that would help us, I think, facilitate a collaborative and multi-stakeholder effort to really put in place these the existing future disaster-related data to support the national efforts and this reporting and full implementation of the Sendai Framework. So those are my only comments. I want to thank you for attending. The fact that you are here on a session on monitoring Sendai Framework is key, particularly when we are talking about, at least as a big part of this, the technical data, which often makes people's eyes glaze over. But this is really at the heart of implementation and reduction of disaster risk. Thank you very much.
Okay. Very good. Thank you, Robert. Okay. Right. This the next session now is where we start going into our panel discussions. So let me very briefly introduce our panel to you. I think what I'll do, just to save a bit of time, and I know we started a bit late, I'll just read out people's titles rather than trying to go through their bios, because we started late, and you know, the data's all available online there if you want it. So let's just speed that up a bit. Okay, so let me quickly make some introductions. So starting on my left-hand side, we have Mr. Rohan Richards, and Rohan is the Principal Director, Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. He's the Jamaica and co-chair of the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management, the UNGGIM, as many of you might know that for. And Rohan is also on the working group on geospatial information and services for disaster. So a lot of knowledge and expertise there in this particular field. On my left-hand side, if I can see down there. Yep, okay, we have Miss Paloma Merodio Gomez, and Paloma is the Vice President of the National Institute of Statistics and Geography here within Mexico. So we're also going to hear from Paloma. And then on my right-hand side, I have Mr. Peter Felton. And Peter is the Head of Division for the Humanitarian Assistance in the Federal Foreign Office within the German government. So we're going to hear some perspectives on information and data gathering in an industrialized country with a very strong decentralized federal state system. So that will give us a different perspective on how Germany is trying to improve their monitoring processes. And then last but not least, as I look down on my left-hand side, I have Dr. Natalia Kanmen, and Natalia is the Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund, and she is an Assistant Secretary General. So Natalia also has a lot of experience in strategy and understand the importance of information, as Robert said, which creates the evidence base to inform our investment decisions. So we've got a good panel here. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Rohan. So the floor is yours, Rohan. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Good morning, distinguished delegates. As Marcus mentioned, my intervention is basically based on my current position as head of the National Geospatial Data Management Division in Jamaica, as well as co-chair of the working group Geospatial Information and Services for Disasters at the UNGGIM. I co-chair along with the Philippines at the Global Working Group. So just a bit of correction there, Marcus. So if I speak on behalf of the Philippines as well, you will also understand. So let me just start by saying that it has long been recognized that geospatial information really plays a very important part in the role of DRRM. And we have seen from large-scale events such as Hurricane Matthew recently, the Ebola outbreak in 2014-15, that there is basically a huge gap between the state of geospatial information and services and how that helps inform decision-making. That situation, of course, emphasizes the need to actually find solutions aimed at improving not only the availability, but also the accessibility of quality geospatial information and services, as well as the coordination and communication among stakeholders, so that there's a common operational picture amongst both the responders as well as the decision makers. So from a theoretical point of view, we know that effective disaster risk management frameworks must encompass all phases of disaster cycle, both the risks, the capacities, and participation of the key stakeholders, whether they're international stakeholders, national stakeholders, or as well as members of the community. For information in relation to disasters to be effective, it really and truly must be collected, analyzed, and shared globally. And that hazard information must be integrated as much as possible with all different data sets. To be even more effective, however, geospatial information must be combined with appropriate baseline fundamental data sets, which include not just administrative boundaries, but information on the physical infrastructure, information on the distribution of settlements, various demographic information, socioeconomic, population by sizes, sex, income, education, and of course, our speakers before us spoke of the need to actually have that integration between disaster information as well as statistical information. So let me go into the national experience in terms of what we have been doing within Jamaica. Now, I always use the example of 1988 when Hurricane Gilbert hit Jamaica. At that point, our geospatial industry in Jamaica was really just becoming mature. Even though we had our disaster plans back then, those were never really implemented. There was no integration between geospatial information as well as other types of information. And of course, the country suffered enormously. Fast forward to 2004, at the onset of Hurricane Ivan, we had acquired satellite imagery. We had, of course, been placing quite a bit of investment in not just the acquisition of spatial data, but also integrating that spatial data with other various types of data. We also established what we have termed a National Emergency GIS Response Team. And geospatial data basically afforded us to provide a more effective response. Back in 2012, when Hurricane Sandy hit, we were able to utilize all of the geospatial data sets which we had collected over the years, integrated those with all of the data sets that we had available from the statistical side to be able to produce our shelter maps, show various locations of shelters, and of course, all of that data sets were crucially integrated, utilized for Hurricane Ivan response in 2004, Dean response in 2007, flood incident maps were created, and of course, that all of those helped with future responses, for example, with Sandy. So essentially, with the presence of geospatial data within our repository, our risks were identified, evaluated, and prioritized. And the path of Hurricane Sandy, for example, was mapped in relation to critical assets, and risk assessment maps were also developed. Fast forward even further towards the recent years and recent occurrences, we're able to draw on the geospatial information data sets which we have now been amassing over the years, as well as the temporal information from all of those incidents prior, and made available within what we have established locally called a disaster risk information platform, which we have worked in conjunction with our National Disaster Office to establish with some assistance from our World Bank partners. So if we were to look at the constraints in terms of data availability, data accessibility, there really is no panacea to overcoming some of these obstacles. What we really have to work on is stuff like the integration, the data sharing and coordination amongst government entities, but also amongst government entities as well as members of the community. It's very interesting when Marcus was making his presentation, because within our National Emergency GIS Response Team framework, we have included not just members of government, private sector, academia, as well as members of the community. So there's a cross-sectoral approach to the issue of data collection for disaster and disaster response. And what is important to note as well is that within Jamaica, the NERGIS team does not focus only on disaster response, even though that is a critical portion. We focus on the pre-planning, which is very, very important towards addressing response as well as mitigation efforts. So we really need to look at creating comprehensive spatial data infrastructures with GIS web services from which we can expect to see improvements in not just the reduction in time when producing and accessing data, but also the reduction in the responses. So geospatial data and service producers in countries will easily be connected to consumers who actually need the data, and data integrity will also be maintained, and users can more easily share authoritative version of data. Coupled with this is the development of data sharing knowledge platforms, especially for local planning authorities as well as other players. For our colleagues in the Philippines, and I was also given leverage to speak on their behalf, they have gone the route of establishing fairly robust policy as well as legislative frameworks to help to overcome some of those obstacles, managing their own common operational data sets and so on, and of course creating portals as well. And I hope that I will also get the opportunity to speak more about the work of the working group at the UNGGIM further in the discussion. Thank you.
Okay, Rohan. Very comprehensive but clear presentation there on it sounds like some excellent progress being made in a national government context, in a Jamaican government context. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's go down now to the other side of the bench where Paloma is going to tell us about what's happening at the national context in Mexico.
Thank you, Marcos. Buenos días a todos. Good morning, everyone. If we can have the presentation. Muy bien, pues déjenme iniciar con una introducción sobre qué es el INEGI. El INEGI es el Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Geografía de México, una de las pocas instituciones del mundo que conjunta la parte estadística y geográfica en una misma institución. El INEGI es un órgano autónomo del gobierno mexicano que, además de ser un órgano productor de información, coordina el Sistema Nacional de Información Estadística y Geográfica. El sistema está organizado en 4 subsistemas. En cada uno de estos subsistemas existe un comité ejecutivo, varios comités técnicos especializados y grupos de trabajo integrados por diversas unidades de Estado, organismos del sector privado, organizaciones civiles, instituciones académicas y ONGs. El principal objetivo del Sistema Nacional de Información Estadística y Geográfica es producir, integrar y difundir información de interés nacional. La información debe de ser de calidad, pertinente, veraz y oportuna. Y los 4 principios rectores de la información son la accesibilidad, la transparencia, la independencia y la objetividad. Los 4 subsistemas producen información relevante que nos permite generar estrategias de planificación para la reducción del riesgo de desastres. ¿Cómo generamos información para el manejo del riesgo de desastres? Primero, a través del subsistema demográfico y social, que está compuesto por 13 comités técnicos especializados, como por ejemplo el relativo a los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, población y dinámica poblacional, sector educación, entre otros. Uno de los productos más importantes de este subsistema es el Censo de Población y Vivienda, que proporciona información sobre la dinámica de la población y su distribución en el territorio. El Subsistema Nacional Económico cuenta con 11 comités técnicos, entre ellos el relativo a la sociedad de la información, la infraestructura del sector transporte, estadísticas macroeconómicas y cuentas nacionales. En este subsistema se produce el Directorio Nacional de Unidades Económicas, que ofrece datos de identificación, ubicación, actividad económica y tamaño de los negocios activos en todo el territorio nacional. El tercer subsistema es el de Gobierno, Seguridad e Impartición de Justicia, conformado por 7 comités técnicos especializados. Uno de los productos de este subsistema son los censos nacionales de gobierno, que cuentan con información de protección civil a nivel municipal. Y por último, el cuarto subsistema, que es el relativo a la información geográfica y del medio ambiente. Cuenta con 8 comités técnicos especializados y genera información de interés nacional, normas e indicadores sobre la gestión del territorio, el manejo de los recursos naturales y la calidad del medio ambiente. Ahora vemos un ejemplo de información de interés nacional generada en el subsistema de información geográfica y del medio ambiente, que es la información del uso de suelo y vegetación. Este mapa dinámico que observan en la pantalla muestra la evolución de la cobertura vegetal y el uso del suelo a través del tiempo. Comienza con una distribución hipotética de la vegetación primaria. En los últimos 30 años hemos producido 6 series que muestran la dinámica de la vegetación y el uso del suelo. El monitoreo del uso del suelo permite saber la ubicación de áreas que se vuelven peligrosas después de perder su cobertura vegetal. Se pueden ubicar zonas de deforestación, zonas de pérdidas de manglares, zonas de incremento en la agricultura, etc. Información fundamental para evaluar el riesgo, ya sea de impactos como fenómenos meteorológicos como huracanes o también como sequías, en el caso de la agricultura. Dentro del mismo subsistema, específicamente en el Comité Técnico Especializado en Información Geográfica Básica, se desarrolló y se mantiene un sitio colaborativo para la atención de desastres. En este sitio participan diferentes unidades de Estado, intercambiando información estadística y geográfica útil para evaluar el riesgo y contabilizar daños, al cual tienen acceso 9 unidades de Estados con responsabilidad en el manejo de desastres. Y este mapa que ven en pantalla es el mapa digital de México, uno de los productos más consultados. Es una plataforma abierta que permite la visualización y el análisis de más de 200 capas de información geoespacial. Ahora aquí vemos los objetivos y los indicadores del marco de Sendai. Hemos hecho una primera revisión sobre qué información es con la que ya contamos para poder monitorear estos indicadores y dar seguimiento en el tiempo. La coordinación entre los ámbitos económico, demográfico, social, de gobierno, geográfico y del medio ambiente es necesaria para el cálculo de los indicadores del marco de Sendai. Pero pongamos un ejemplo. Estamos en México, en la península de Yucatán, donde Cancún ha sido golpeado de manera recurrente por huracanes formados en el Atlántico Este y en el Caribe. Los huracanes más importantes han sido Gilberto en 1988 y Vilma en el 2005. La franja roja muestra el área potencialmente afectada por el huracán. Gracias al Censo de Población y Vivienda sabemos que hay en esta zona 1.3 millones de habitantes y más de 100,000 viviendas. La población potencialmente afectada sería de 214,000 habitantes y 78,160 viviendas. Por otra parte, según el Directorio Estadístico Nacional de Unidades Económicas, la zona afectada podría sufrir daños en 149 establecimientos, los puntos rojos que ven en el mapa. Serían 30 hoteles, 9 hospitales y 40 escuelas. Con la información del sistema, se podrían medir otros daños potenciales como la infraestructura de comunicaciones, líneas eléctricas, carreteras, zonas inundadas, erosión costera, etc. El Estado mexicano tiene el compromiso de dar seguimiento a los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible y para ello el Ejecutivo Federal decretó recientemente la creación del Consejo Nacional de la Agenda 2030 para el Desarrollo Sostenible, que es una instancia de vinculación del Ejecutivo Federal con los gobiernos locales, el sector privado, la sociedad civil y la academia. Así, México adquiere un compromiso de largo plazo para dar seguimiento a estos objetivos que trasciende administraciones. Y bueno, para concluir, la conformación del Sistema Nacional de Información Estadística y Geográfica potencia la generación, uso de la información geográfica y estadística de calidad, pertinente, veraz y oportuna, garantizando que los datos sean accesibles y objetivos. Y con esto se tiene la capacidad de atender las iniciativas internacionales y monitorear los riesgos de desastres. El INEGI cuenta ya con un sistema que provee información para la prevención de riesgos de desastres y se cuenta con el marco normativo necesario para generar información confiable y oportuna en la materia. Muchas gracias.
Paloma, thank you for that presentation, and thank you for showing us how we can really present information in a truly engaging. That was brilliant. Well done. Great presentation. Lovely. Okay. Hey, how do you follow that one? That's difficult. But Peter is going to now take us into an industrialized country with a federal system and show us what they are doing in terms of also in improving their monitoring and information gathering systems. So, Peter, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marcus. Ladies and gentlemen, we've already heard a lot about accessibility and quality of data. Let me focus on the aspect of availability of data, which is particularly relevant in states, in countries that are federally organized, and therefore I would like to give you a short overview on how Germany will coordinate the disaster-related data collection for the Sendai monitoring in our federal system, bearing in mind that actually in Germany we are currently at a very critical moment because we are in the process of setting up the system on monitoring and reporting on the implementation of the Sendai Framework, and exchanges like this are very helpful and very useful for us in this process. We have contributed to the data readiness review, so details on where we are currently standing you can find, and I would like to refer you to the review. Now, being a federal republic, in Germany, relevant data are actually available at various levels, mainly at the level of the 16 different German federal states, but also at the local level, including with the first responders. So on the one hand, risk reduction and the implementation of the Sendai Framework are therefore extremely important as part of Germany's national civil protection and federal emergency planning. But on the other hand, of course, risk reduction work plays a crucial role as part of our humanitarian assistance and international cooperation. Therefore, we need to think about data availability in order to measure our own national Sendai implementation, and at the same time, we also need to be able to measure our contribution to international risk reduction. A federal system in countries such as Germany brings opportunities and challenges in terms of civil protection, emergency planning, and the availability of data needed for the Sendai implementation measurement. Hence, the national Sendai focal point in Germany will play a crucial role for such data collection. Accordingly, we have decided that our national focal point will be the main entity for all our federal states when it comes to the collection and reporting of relevant data in the context of the Sendai Framework. In Germany, we have the big advantage that there is already a Federal Office for Civil Protection in place to coordinate the civil protection activities of all our 16 federal states in a cooperative way. The Federal Office for Civil Protection, therefore, naturally became our national Sendai focal point, and has been tasked with the coordination of the national implementation and data gathering. The Federal Office for Civil Protection was already established in 2004 within our Federal Ministry of the Interior in response to hazards such as major natural disasters that affect several federal states at the same time, as did, for example, the floodings in Germany in 2002, 2009, and 2013. The work of the Federal Office for Civil Protection includes carrying out emergency planning and also improving the cooperation between the Federation and the federal states with regard to risk reduction. With this federal office in place, Germany has one central organizational element to ensure the reporting towards the Sendai Framework. Our national focal point will collect the relevant data from the different federal states, combine them, and provide the necessary reporting in a harmonized manner. With this multiplicity of services, the Federal Office for Civil Protection will be the main Sendai service center for the authorities at all federal levels of the administration. However, this only covers the national implementation and data gathering so far. As Germany is also supporting the implementation of disaster risk reduction as part of its humanitarian assistance and international cooperation, the data gathering regarding the Sendai Indicator F on international cooperation will be of high importance as well. Therefore, we will connect our national focal point and the national reporting with the available and relevant official development assistance, ODA data, to enable a linkage between the national Sendai implementation and our international risk reduction engagement. And in this regard, we actively participate in the current discussion within the OECD on how to define the different codes so as to make them transparent with regard to risk reduction engagement. The international risk reduction work of Germany is a national responsibility and lies with the Federal Foreign Office and the Federal Ministry for Development Cooperation. To ensure the best possible linkage between our national Sendai implementation and our international DRR engagement work, we established an Inter-Ministerial Sendai working group. This group brings together the most important government agencies and implementing partners, which are the Federal Foreign Office, the Federal Ministry of the Interior, the Federal Ministry for Development Cooperation, the Federal Office for Civil Protection, the GIZ, and the German Red Cross. This Inter-Ministerial Sendai Working Group is the steering group for the national focal point, and it also ensures the necessary linkage between our national and our international work with regard to the Sendai Framework. Additionally, we also support the overall global data availability. Accordingly, the Federal Foreign Office has supported UNISDR substantially from the beginning in their development of the Sendai Framework Monitor. We will continue our support for UNISDR to use the Sendai Framework Monitor, and we are very happy that UNISDR will host their monitoring team in Bonn. Let me underline that all our discussions about data collection, analysis, and monitoring are only bearing fruit if they translate into concrete DRR action on the ground and contribute to safer and better prepared communities. At the next global platform in 2019, we will hopefully see a large number of countries and regional organizations having submitted their first self-assessment reports about their efforts to implement the Sendai Framework. On behalf of my country, I can assure you that we will continue with our efforts nationally and internationally to implement disaster risk reduction and to support the Sendai Framework. Thank you very much.
Okay, Peter, thank you. Thank you. Very impressive to hear what progress is being made within different countries, and particularly this kind of whole of government approach that the German federal government is taking to this. So yeah, very good. Okay, we are going back down the table again. So Natalia, let's hear your thoughts from the UN's perspective on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. estimado Señor Fuente, Mr. Oxley, Mr. Glasser, and other distinguished panelists. The purpose of looking at monitoring is very germane to the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, and our work as part of a United Nations system led by the work of UNI SDR towards the disaster reduction goals. And today I would like to speak to that work at the level of communities, and I'd also like to reflect on an interesting point that Robert already put on the table. Societies must gain confidence in being able to anticipate and to prevent. And we will also need to do a better job at monitoring, at coordinating, and coherence, because we need to prove very confidently that something that did not happen was beneficial. Tracking and monitoring helps us to explain that a bad consequence that was averted is something that we should be proud of and take credit for. In line with this, UNFPA has worked across the United Nations system, delivering as one, to build communities' readiness and their resilience to disasters. And to do this, we focus broadly on data quality, data timeliness, and data sharing. This helps us to understand and improve the safety nets that communities are asking for. In line with this point also is my second point, which is that the planning has to encompass a coverage and a sensitivity to people at risk who may have special needs and special requirements. For example, in the mandate of UNFPA falls safe pregnancy and safe childbirth. So in terms of planning, as well as in terms of resilience, the experience of an adolescent girl who may become pregnant, if she is pregnant, how does she plan for her antenatal care, for medications, for a whole list of services which may be disrupted during a time of disaster. There's a particular focus in terms of data in making sure that one of the goals of the Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 23, to leave no one behind, gets fulfilled. And that is the power of data to reveal things that were invisible before. So the insistence on having decision makers at the table who are gender sensitive, who understand age throughout the spectrum, from childhood to old age, who understand the contributions of someone who is differently abled to a preparation scenario, and not to forget that the purpose of gathering the data, the purpose of sharing the data, the purpose of pinpointing using sophisticated technology who is where and what they need is to make sure that the safety net is woven tightly and that we can find people, whether in a geographically remote area or whether through a circumstance of their age or their biology, are going to need more intensive attention. I would also like to highlight here the importance of young people, working with Unicef in particular, who have analyzed the evidence in terms of disruption of education services, but they are also working hand in hand with the rest of the UN system to show that young people from a very early age are not only capable but desirous of doing things that are going to protect their community and their planet. So their schooling, incorporating the principles of disaster risk reduction, their ability to share with their peers their understanding of what to do and how to do it, can truly be life-saving in situations where readiness and prevention is key. I'd like to mention that UNFPA capitalizes on our expertise on census, on helping governments with survey and civil registration exercises, because like much of the UN, we are a permanent part of the working partnership with governments. So this positions us and pre-positions us to be able to anticipate, to work on predictive exercises, but also to work hand in hand with communities and to understand that perspective as well. Building national capacities, in our case, to respond to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights, and also to support global level advocacy and galvanize efforts on the need to understand that biology doesn't stop. Whether it's a calamity or whether it's a normal course of life, the sexual and reproductive health needs of women and girls must be attended to, and in particular, as mentioned, pregnant women who will need special circumstances to be taken into account. I would also like to briefly say that the coordination role of the United Nations is exemplified by what Mexico Global Platform 2017 is attempting to do. It's very important for us to understand the specifics of what every country is requiring and requesting. And the Sendai Framework makes it clear that the coordination from the ground up, as well as globally, nationally, locally, and even at the individual level, is going to spell success. Sendai is telling us that we should be prepared. It's saying that prevention is far better than any cure. So by understanding our baselines, by having a system in place that's tracking risk, by working together and having pre-existing plans in place, and in particular, by equipping the population from the youngest citizen all the way through to the most elderly person, to be able to understand the timely and life-saving information is the backbone of the commitment that UNFPA and other UN agencies share, so that inclusive, gender-sensitive, sensitivity to anyone who may be at higher risk is included in our planning. Thank you so much.
Okay, Natalia, thank you for that. And great to hear how many of the issues that have come out over the last few days about inclusion and engagement and empowerment, very much examples there of how this information can help do that. So thank you for that. Yeah. Good. Right. Now, so that's the presentations over. What we're going to do now is we have a set questions, some questions for each of the panelists. So we're going to run through that, and then we're going to go into an open discussion with the broader participants here. So let me turn first to Rohan. Rohan, yeah. So the questions that we've got here, Rohan, in front of you is how can accurate, timely, reliable information benefit decision makers and leads people who are trying to reduce disaster risk? So how can that information benefit decision makers? And how can we overcome some of those obstacles to data availability, the accessibility, the sharing of data that we said is absolutely critical, the coordination of data that we've talked about? So, Rohan, 2 questions for you. Sure. So let's try to keep it relatively brief because we are a little bit behind, yeah?
Okay. So, thanks again, Marcus. I did allude to a number of the questions in my opening presentation. I mentioned the examples of how Jamaica transitioned from 1998 in Gilbert, when we had no access to geospatial data or information or any kind of integration of those various types of data sets, to where we are now in terms of establishing our various standards and protocols, as well as a common operational platform to be able to share those data sets with all of our stakeholders. I think key to all of the issues in relation to accessibility is the issue of coordination and, of course, integration. I'd have to make a plug here for the work that we have been doing at the UNGGIM level in terms of working to ensure that a strategic framework has been developed by the working group, which seeks to basically complement the Sendai Framework in terms of establishing various priorities for action. The priorities for action speak generally to the general recognition that geospatial information is vital throughout the process. We do have the saying within the GIM community that everything happens somewhere and location really and truly matters. So the strategic framework which we have developed basically speaks to an outcome looking towards human, economic, and environmental risks and impacts of disasters being prevented and reduced through the use of geospatial information and services, and a goal that quality geospatial information and services are available, accessible, and timely, and as well as coordinated to support decision making. And within that strategic framework, we speak about actions that are recommended not just at the local and national level, but also at the global and regional. And of course, speaks to the various role of stakeholders and how it is that stakeholders can work together. We heard from Natalia in terms of the response side from the UNFPA. We heard from Peter in terms of how the various whole of government has been approaching. So the intention of the strategic framework is to basically pull the role of stakeholders together to say this is what we are recommending in terms of how we can work together to ensure that there's a focus on DRR across all of society, all of government and all of society.
Okay.
Marcus.
Some recommendations that we can draw from that in terms of the role of the GGM possibly going forward, how that can cut across the different frameworks, the SDGs. Do you want to talk a little bit more about the role of the GGM there, just particularly in relation to the, both the Sendai and the SDGs? Do you...
Certainly. Yeah. So in 2015, when the group of experts met, we agreed that there has to be a focus on the issue of disaster mitigation. So the working group was established to look at geospatial information services for disasters. When the working group got together, and of course it was a far-ranging group in terms of various stakeholders from member states as well as different UN organizations and private sector as well. We ensured that there was complementarity, not just with the Sendai Framework, but also with the targets that were outlined in the SDGs. So we do have as some guiding principles the issue of geospatial information and services being vital, the Sendai Framework being a guiding principle, the SDGs being a guiding principle, the issue of data coordination as well as collaboration also being a guiding principle. But most importantly, open data and access is also very important. Now, what we have been doing at the working group level, and we do seek to get endorsement at UNGGIM 7, which is going to be held in August of this year, is we have been pushing for member states to basically implement the strategic framework within their national systems of operations, and then we can see how those can then dovetail up towards the global level, both for the Sendai as well as for the SDGs.
Okay, good. Let's. Okay, thank you, Rohan. Okay, Paloma. I mean, similar questions in a way. It's the questions around how the existing national statistical officers can be used to better inform DRR decision making, and about the role of those statistical officers in terms of the monitoring of the Sendai, but also the SDGs, you know, this issue of the integration of using monitoring as a way to get closer connectivity and harmonization of those frameworks. So over to you on that.
Thank you, Marcus. Bueno, como ya lo mencionaba en mi presentación, el INEGI, el Instituto Nacional de Estadística y Geografía, no es solamente productor de información, de datos que nos sirven para la prevención de riesgo de desastres, sino también tiene una función muy importante de coordinador del Sistema Nacional de Información Estadística y Geográfica. Y aquí al coordinar a las diferentes unidades de Estado, a los distintos miembros de estos comités técnicos de los que ya les mencionaba en la presentación en el subsistema, pues se genera toda la información necesaria para la prevención del riesgo de desastres. Es muy importante aquí incluir a estas unidades de Estado porque son ellas las dueñas de la información, quienes generan los registros administrativos necesarios para poder dar un seguimiento puntual en caso de un desastre. Es por eso que esta coordinación entre diferentes unidades de Estado es fundamental para la prevención del riesgo, y hoy México cuenta ya con un marco normativo, con una ley que establece los mecanismos para generar esta información de manera coordinada entre los diferentes actores. Y el reto no es solamente producir y analizar la información, sino también difundirla y hacerla pública, y es por eso que el INEGI, pues toda la información que produce la pone a disposición del público, la hace disponible a través de su página de internet para que de esta manera pueda ser utilizado por todas las personas que así lo deseen. Respecto a la coordinación de los objetivos de desarrollo sostenible, pues para el INEGI es tarea de todos los días dar seguimiento a iniciativas globales como es el Acuerdo de París o en este caso los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible. Así que el seguimiento al marco de Sendai será una de las tareas que el INEGI incorporará en su día a día, y es por eso que también hemos generado estos mecanismos dentro del Sistema Nacional de Información Estadística y Geográfica, donde contamos con un comité técnico especializado para el seguimiento a los Objetivos de Desarrollo Sostenible, que es presidido por la Presidencia de la República y donde el INEGI funge como secretariado técnico para dar seguimiento a cada uno de los objetivos y de sus indicadores. Algo similar tendría que crearse para dar seguimiento a los objetivos de Sendai, ya que pues muchos de los indicadores de Sendai, me parece que hay 5 indicadores que también están contenidos en los ODS, y es a través de estos comités, de esta coordinación, que se genera la información que es útil para la prevención del riesgo de desastres. Muchas gracias.
Okay, Paloma, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Peter, over to you. And the questions we've got here are around, one is around, you know, this challenge in coordinating all this kind of interdisciplinary data. We've got various external frameworks. You've already talked about the importance of inter-ministerial working groups. So how are we going to, you know, it sounds a huge coordination challenge. It sounds a huge integrated challenge. And how are we going to then get the core of that data to inform our planning processes, our disaster risk reduction processes?
Yeah, indeed. This is a challenge, and in a federal state where the federation is responsible for civil protection and where the states or the provinces are responsible for disaster management, there is a multitude of responsibilities and a multitude of competencies and a vast variety of sources of information from the federal and the state statistical offices all the way down to the local level, including the first responders, So fire brigades, police, health facilities, for example, are also generating relevant data. How to bring all this together? We are working on a standardized reporting system. How can we achieve that? Only through cooperation between the federal level and the state level, and with a strong focal point, the Sendai National Focal Point, which has the responsibility to coordinate this and which must have a clear mandate recognized by all, obviously. Now this data collected is not only there for reporting under the Sendai Framework, but it should inform our own risk reduction work within Germany. And therefore, these data and this reporting and this data collection must be based on a national Sendai implementation strategy, which includes an overview then of the data which is available. And based on this available data and on the national Sendai implementation strategy, the national monitoring and reporting system needs to be set up. Now, so far as your question with regard to cooperation and coordination. But the question, of course, is how to make sure that the interdisciplinary approach across the whole board of disaster risk reduction can be addressed. And in that regard, in our plans how to set it up, the National Disaster Risk Reduction Platform will play an important role. It needs to ensure that all aspects are covered. It needs to ensure and encourage openness and exchange and a steady flow of know-how, not only of data. And this national platform needs to encompass all the relevant actors, all the relevant stakeholders, as we have said. We already have, and have held it for a couple of years, an annual disaster risk reduction conference, bringing together the relevant actors at the national and the German actors at the national and at the international level, and which includes the government, which includes civil society, non-governmental organizations, which includes scientific institutions, and which we will now broaden to include also the state government level, which is absolutely necessary to bring on board all the relevant data. And we will have our next conference in this regard in October, which will then be a defining moment for setting up the whole system. It will be organized, obviously, by our national focal point, but decisively also by the German Red Cross that has played a crucial role from the beginning in our work on disaster risk reduction. I mentioned when I came to the National Sendai Implementation Strategy the aspect of relevance of data. And if you give me 30 more seconds, I feel obliged, because Germany is holding the chair of the Platform on Disaster Displacement, to briefly address this issue. The Platform on Disaster Displacement, addressing the working on the protection needs of persons displaced by extreme weather events, by climate change. Now, we have among the targets and the indicators of the Sendai Framework nothing specifically addressing disaster displacement, while still experts say that disaster displacement will become one of the main challenges of the 21st century. So it is our hope that while reporting under the Sendai Framework does not specifically address this, countries will include in their national data collection this aspect in order to inform national strategies that fully take into account the protection and the assistance needs of those who might be displaced through extreme weather events.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Peter. Yeah. Right, Natalia. Yep. The questions I've got for you now are particularly focusing on this health and education sectors that you mentioned, about how will they benefit from the monitoring of the Sendai Framework, and how can the health and education sector contribute to the issues that you raised about the access to the data and the relevancy of that data, to particularly down also to the the range of different users that need that information, and what can the UNFPA do to support that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I just want to say that Rohan's points and Peter's points about the need for an interdisciplinary approach to data is very much at the heart of what UNFPA is doing. Our mandate is predicated on not only the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030, but a predecessor, which is the International Conference on Population and Development platform, which says that people-centered development is what is needed, and Sendai very much follows on that as well. So addressing the health and the education sector is looking holistically at what is it that a community needs, what is it that a government wishes to do to plan, to prevent, to pre-position, and to intervene as necessary to provide the necessary services and protection for groups that would need such. So the SDGs are looking at social status, whether it's poverty, whether it's hunger, and things that may be pervasive in the community even prior to the impending risk or disaster. The economy is still the backbone of the nation's ability to address problems that are arising. And then the very planetary condition, the environmental conditions, all of these have a role to play. So from the perspective of UNFPA and how we work with other arms of the United Nations and with governments, I would like to give a concrete example, because midwives and midwifery is a way of providing services to pregnant women who may be already at risk through geography or social status, but certainly who need particular forms of planning. So here I would say that the integration of the principles of disaster risk reduction into professional curricula for the teachers and the professionals in academia needs to be much more thought through and pervasive, so that these principles would be second nature to the generations of students that are learning how to be a midwife, for example. So part of your responsibility becomes to help your community that you are serving pre-plan for potential adverse effects that may be better predicted because of our monitoring, et cetera, but which may also come out of the blue. So the necessity to have the ability to pre-think through these things in a curriculum would be very useful. It's not only true for the health sector, but obviously if you're an architect or an engineer or whoever you are, these principles need to be brought down to the daily lives of academia. There's also a role which UNFPA participates in vis-a-vis innovation in the use of technology. And we saw the advanced technology that Mexico is using in Paloma's presentation. But in other countries who may not have the advanced technology, there's also a role for using simple technology to disseminate information, to make sure that everyone is aware of, again, the DRR principles, but also the civil protection principles and how it is that the whole system works together in order to ensure survival of lives in the first and primary instance. And just to close, I'd like to say that this is where we see young people as a particular asset. We see them as part of the solution, definitely not part of the problem, because of their creativity, because of their interest, and because of their willingness. And at this conference, I think we've distinguished ourselves because there are 40+ young people as part of a new youth engagement platform which UNISDR brought into being, and they are probably some of them in the room with us right now. But the point is that their social consciousness and their ability to weave data collection, data gathering, and analysis into this pre-positioning and planning exercise, it's going to come a lot more second nature for that generation than it has in the past. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, Natalia, thank you. And in many ways, that very much resonates from our own civil society experiences. Is that engaging people and end users is in this information monitoring, gathering, sharing process is an empowering process. It brings them into the engagement of getting these frameworks into actual reality. So, okay, we're going to open this up now. We're going to start. We have a discussant who has a question for us, and then we'll open up to the floor. So let me go straight away to Assistant Secretary General Chang, who is with the World Meteorological Office. We need a microphone over, yeah. And then we'll open it up with a roving mic. Yeah. So, yeah.
Thank you,
Dr. Chang. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, dear Chairman, and good morning, everyone, dear colleagues. First, great congratulations to your panel, and with wonderful presentations and very comprehensive, and I really benefit a lot. Really, thank you all. And taking this opportunity, I would like to also draw your attention to the major outcome of a two-day multi-hazard early warning conference, which was held from the beginning of the week, Monday, Tuesday, at the same venue here. And with a joint effort with USDR, thank you, Robert, and UNESCO, and my organization, or the meteorological organization with my Secretary General, Professor Talas, and also Mexico government, Luis Filipe, Excellency Minister, thank you. And actually, three of you jointly opened the conference and very nicely navigate the discussions. And I would like you to know that this meeting was attended by more than 450 participants with a high-level representatives of national meteorological, hydrological services around the world. Because as Rob, I remember that you held a meeting in New York in March. You clearly say that more than 90% of disasters are hydrological, meteorological disasters, which WMO feel that a strong obligation we have to contribute. Certainly, this conference was also together with several key partners like International Telecommunication Union, ITU, FAO, World Bank Group, ISCAP, and others. And this conference was clearly aligned with the Sendai Framework as and its targets. And like you articulate from the very beginning, that the ultimate success of the early warnings will be measured against the Sendai Framework target A and B, is loss of life and the economic losses, while the access and the effectiveness of early warning will need to be measured against target G. And a set of metrics to measure access and the effectiveness of early warning systems was developed in the context of the conference for consultation and validations. And these metrics follow the four comments of an effective early warning system and should assist all the countries, nations, measure target G and with its indicators. And in this regard, WMO, the World Bank Group, UNSDR, and supported by CRUISE, as a climate risk early warning system, and many other partners of the international network of multi-hazard early warning conference, early warning system will further develop and consult on the metrics, in particular with the countries and the experts. And in addition to this metrics, another major outcome of this conference is that, especially at the closing session, the WMO members and the permanent representatives of the WMO Meteorological Services who attend the conference agreed on a conference communique, which I cannot take the time to read. It's quite long. It's 3-4 pages. But I would like to highlight the important section, which the communique reaffirms that the overarching priority for WMO community are to produce information that assists in reducing losses of life and property from hydrometeorological hazard, and supporting actions that promote resilience to climate variability and change, and enhance the socio-economic value of hydrometeorological information and services. This also underlines that the products and the services delivered by National Meteorological Hydrological Services to address the weather and climate risk are essential for meeting the long-term ambition reflected in the Sendai Framework and Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, this communique to commit to strengthen partnerships from country level to community levels, from regional level to global level, with major government agencies responsible for disaster risk reduction. And the last, definitely is not least, that this communique call on the participants attending this 2017 Global Platform for Disaster Risk Reduction to acknowledge this communique and support these actions. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you for that contribution, Dr. Chan. Okay, I'm going to take 3 questions. It's a first come, first serve. Time is ticking, so get your hands up and we'll try to get the microphone. So we'll take all 3 questions first, and then whoever on the panel feels that they want to respond, feel free. So let's, have we got the mic? Yep. Yeah, okay, there's a gentleman over there. There's a lady over here and there's a lady over there. So I've got 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Okay, so questions first,
Yes.
and then we'll...
Yes, thank you giving me the floor. I'm a strategic advisor of Nagasaki University in Japan. I would like to put a very technical question. In every forum of major, the organization, the monitoring is really focused on, for example, UNFCCC, climate change. I know that they have a very sophisticated the measurement framework, so-called monitoring and reporting and verification. I think the Green Climate Fund devotes nearly half of its resources to adaptation. And adaptation can be interpreted by ISDR as the disaster reduction. So terminologies are different, but the substantive activities are almost the same. I wonder whether ISDR is developing any common measurement framework of activities, and also the resources incurred or resources to be incurred. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. We had a lady down here and we had a lady up there. So, I don't where's the microphone? Oh, right.
Yeah. I'm speaking on behalf of the 32 remote participants sitting in Bangladesh and not sleeping and listening very carefully. And they're asking the following questions. All concerned stakeholders must ensure that persons with disabilities from local community level are also meaningfully engaged in this monitoring and evaluation process. There must be investment made to build capacity of local persons with disabilities or disabled people's organizations on data, statistics, indicators, monitoring and evaluation process, which will support them to contribute and make this process meaningful. including the upcoming 2019 Sendai Monitoring Report. And they would like to know what is the opinion of the panelists in this regard in order to make this happen. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And can we get the third question as well? Let's just get the, yep.
Thank you very much. I work for the NRC's Internal Displacement Monitoring Centre, and we're working in collaboration with UN and civil society colleagues as part of the state-led platform on disaster displacement. I'd like to support the points made by Mr. Felton. IDMC's global data shows that disasters cause over 25 million displacements every year on average. For some people, displacement is a short-term disruption in their lives, but for many others, it's a recurrent, long-lasting, or protracted driver of vulnerability. Countries now need to take a critical look at the way they plan and execute evacuations and enable relocations. Evacuations are life-saving, but they can also result in large-scale and prolonged displacement. Planned relocations are even more challenging and often politically charged. And we know that all forms of displacement have disproportionate impacts on the most vulnerable countries and people, including women, children, older people, people with disabilities, and indigenous communities. And as Mr. Glasser put it so well, if you don't measure it, it's less likely to happen. This is an increasingly urgent issue for people displaced from their homes by disaster or at risk of becoming so. And this means collecting data on displacement not just immediately after an event, but also further down the line, months and years even afterwards. So I'd like to ask the panelists, what is it that you feel states can do to ensure that this is immediately addressed in both national and local disaster risk reduction strategies and in their data collection and analysis systems? Thank you.
Okay, so panel, just pick up as you feel. I think there was one question around the common measurement frameworks and about common resources to support that. There was a question particularly about inclusion of disabilities groups, but I think that's wider than just disabilities. It's other marginalized groups. And then there's a particular question around this displacement issue, which Peter also mentioned, which is, is going to be a major issue as we go forward. And how do we embed that within our processes as well? So, Robert, do you want to...
Thank you. So there was, I'm not on the panel, but there was one question that was specifically about the links between climate change, COP, and the Sendai Framework. There are many elements of climate change adaptation that do not have anything to do with disasters. A good example would be heat stress in buildings, for example, as the climate warms and what to do about that. There are many aspects of disaster risk reduction that have nothing to do with climate change. For example, hazards like volcanoes, earthquakes, chemical reactor accidents, or chemical spills, or industrial accidents, nuclear reactor accidents. So there are many things that are not the same. But in the middle, as you correctly point out, there is a significant overlap between climate change adaptation to extreme events like floods, droughts, extreme storms, sea level rise, which leads to inundation and saltwater inundation in deltas, and this long list of issues. And those are a significant percentage of all natural disasters are in those categories of hydrometeorological events that are increasing in frequency and severity. So there's a very close connection, and that's one reason why the COP, the Paris Agreement, refers to disaster risk reduction. The SDGs refers to both climate change and disaster risk. So we've developed in the treaties integration between SDG and Sendai. The Paris indicators are still being developed, but we're working very closely with our colleagues in Bonn at UNFCCC. We will be engaging with them to try and continue to build this coherence across the reporting frameworks. And on financing, even the Green Climate Fund as well, it can be disaster risk reduction for climate adaptation as well. So I think that was a very good point. Thank you for raising it.
Okay.
Gracias. No, solamente comentar que el INEGI sigue pues, lo planteado por la ONU y el Grupo de Washington para incorporar en los censos la medición de la discapacidad, y contamos con unas publicaciones respecto a información y cómo incorporamos la discapacidad que puede ser consultada en línea en nuestra página web. No solamente tratamos de incorporar temas de discapacidad en nuestros levantamientos de información, así como otros temas de género que también ya fueron mencionados en la mesa. Así que la visión de que las estadísticas deben de contener información de todos los grupos vulnerables es algo que el INEGI ya toma en cuenta en el día a día en todos sus levantamientos. Muchas gracias.
So 1 minute each, please, on what we think those critical issues are. Let me follow the normal order that we've been running. So, Rohan, let me go over to you, please. Thank you.
Okay, 1 minute. So my closing remarks, geography and location actually do matter. That is why there has been so much focus at the UNGGM level in ensuring that there's a focus on geospatial information and services and how these can be intertwined within the monitoring frameworks, not just of Sendai, but also of the SDGs. We really have to reach a point where, as a global community, we basically fill the data gaps and reach the stage where we're integrating, like our colleagues at INEI, statistical information with geographical information in order to effectively monitor and manage the SDGs as well as other international frameworks. And we really do need to work together, not just as a global community to ensure that it happens, but within countries, including persons within the communities, persons with disability, as well as those within marginal groups. And also, my final point is just we really have to publicize best cases, success stories, because when others see what can happen, then it becomes something to achieve by those who are not at the stage that the successors are. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, Rohan, thank you. Paloma, I'm going to go straight over to you, yeah?
Bueno, pues yo quisiera terminar esta sesión agradeciendo el apoyo de Mark Gordon y todo su equipo en la planeación de este panel. Creo que ha sido una conversación muy benéfica para todos. El INEGI agradece el espacio para presentar el trabajo que ya viene haciendo y solamente cerrar con una reflexión, que es que todo sucede en un lugar, y es por esto que en especial en el caso de la información para prevención de desastres es muy importante que la estadística y la geografía vayan de la mano, y a través de los sistemas de información estadística y geográfica que genera el INEGI, pues estamos trabajando para tener información oportuna, clara, veraz, para la prevención del riesgo de desastres. Muchas gracias.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Paloma. Peter?
Thank you. 3 brief points. When it comes to data collection, ensure that it is complete and that it is comprehensive and that it takes into account all relevant sources, that it is disaggregated, not least with regard to disability, and that it is then gathered in a systematic way, taking into account the different collection systems that need to be aggregated. Different countries will have different systems depending on their national setup. In our case, we will use a strong national focal point supported by a national platform that brings on board all stakeholders. Second point, data by nature tend to be anonymous. They anonymize the destiny of individuals. When we come to action based on these data, we need to make sure that our action is really people-centered and that we bear in mind that whatever we do is about the situation, about the fate, sometimes about the suffering of individuals, and to have this as a basis of our work when acting upon the data we have collected, I think is very important. And the third point, there are gaps in data in different aspects, and one, and it has also been highlighted from the floor, is the aspect of disaster displacement. So even if we do not specifically need to report on disaster displacement data, we need to collect them in all relevant countries, and we need to act upon them. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. And Natalie, final reflections, please.
Thank you. I'd just like to close with a comment that UNFPA has been working with governments to establish a minimum initial services package that includes a special calculator so that we can estimate who will need, in our particular case, sexual and reproductive health services. But I think the principle of anticipating what are the minimum services that are going to be needed is an important one. And in line with that, I'd also like to refer to the comment from the floor on the resources planning as well, because the pre-positioning of resources and understanding the budgets that are related to these tasks has to be thought through in advance to provide optimal service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've been told I have to finish at 10 past, so we are just about there. I have been asked to provide a few summary thoughts on what we've been listening to, which I've been scribbling down as we've been going. It's beyond me in terms of, I'm not a data expert, but clearly the issues that are coming up as we're discussing today are the issues around this kind of a need to take a systems-wide understanding of this. This has got to be multidisciplinary. It's got to be engage a lot of different users in this. It's got to be comprehensive. We've talked about coordination. We've talked about integration. We've talked about the importance of disaggregating the data and making sure that it's accessible to a whole range of different users, from first responders, from affected communities, right the way up through national level decision makers, policy makers. I mean, this is a formidable challenge. We've already had examples of where ideas of bringing together interdisciplinary task force, the need to have standardized reporting systems, the need to see where the commonality is in our indicators. So I think there are examples of where we are starting to bring this together, and how we are managing to reduce the complexity of the system that we have in a more harmonized, coherent way. And clearly, I think going forward, I think those are some of the challenges that we're going to have to address going forward. And it sounds like there are particular roles of certain agencies that are already, well down the path towards trying to tackle this. So I'll think I'll stop there. The panel will sit down together after this discussions, and we have recorded proceedings, so we will try to get some summary statement together, but beyond my ability at the moment to do that. So having said that now, I'm going to hand over back to our co-chair, who I just want to say thank you for standing in at the last minute there. I appreciate that. So over to you, sir.
Muchas gracias a todos. Hemos estado escuchando con mucho interés las participaciones tan importantes de los panelistas, que van concluyendo en una estructura muy clara de las necesidades que tenemos. Es indiscutible que las bases de datos sobre la estadística y el tema de pérdidas tienen que irse integrando permanentemente. Me gustó el tema de Peter Falten sobre la coordinación y colaboración internacional y el progreso que se ha venido teniendo, como lo ha comentado Rohan, el progreso de integración de datos y la colaboración internacional. Muy importante el tema de mujeres, niñas y discapacitados en su conocimiento de cuáles son las afectaciones por los desastres. Es indiscutible, como aquí lo escuchamos de la institución INEGI mexicana, cómo se ha ido desarrollando esta integración de datos que ha servido mucho para que el Centro Nacional de Prevención de Desastres de México pudiese sobre esta información elaborar todos los softwares que permitiera diseñar aquello que nos indique cuáles son los indicadores de cómo nos van a afectar a los fenómenos naturales de cualquier índole, tanto la parte hidrometeorológica como los volcanes, como los sismos, porque ya con la información perfectamente estructurada sabemos qué cantidad de población puede ser afectada, cuál es la infraestructura que puede ser afectada en cuanto a carreteras, edificios y hogares, dónde están las condiciones de mayor riesgo frente a cualquier fenómeno que hagamos. Yo creo que aquí lo que tenemos que hacer es que todos los países nos comprometamos a construir una alianza mundial de datos sobre catástrofes relacionadas sobre el desarrollo sostenible. Yo creo que este es el tema más importante. Entre mayor aportación vayamos dando de los avances de las regiones, de las comunidades, de los países, podremos integrar la información que determine cuáles son las verdaderas vulnerabilidades que esperamos frente al cambio climático. Todos los desarrollos que hayamos estructurado hasta el momento pueden ser perfectibles, porque el cambio climático nos está demostrando indiscutiblemente que el comportamiento de la Tierra es diferente. No podemos detener la fuerza de la naturaleza, sí podemos estar preparados teniendo información, y este es el mayor reto. Nosotros en México hemos desarrollado una cartografía, un diseño de información que nos está permitiendo un avance en cuanto a todas las tecnologías de monitoreo para poder observar cómo se comportan los fenómenos y cuáles son las afectaciones que pueden llegar a la población. La estadística es la base del conocimiento. Los números que se puedan otorgar y que podamos aportar al mundo nos va a permitir ser más resilientes. Muchas gracias a los panelistas, ha sido una discusión muy interesante, pero lo más importante es regresemos a nuestros países con un compromiso que nos permita que todas las decisiones de los puntos del marco de Sendai avancen con un aterrizaje serio que permita que nuestros países el día de mañana sean menos vulnerables. Muchas gracias a todos y que sigan pasando una estancia agradable en mi país.